Hi, I'm Olivia.
And I'm Amy.
And this is a Girls in Marketing podcast. Every week, we release a new episode that you won't want to miss. Our guests are industry experts with amazing experiences, so you'll always come away with new nuggets of wisdom. From educational and inspiring episodes covering the latest in digital marketing to casual and fun chats with the Girls in Marketing team, unpacking marketing myths and trends, we've got it all.
Here at Girls in Marketing, we're all about empowering and supporting women to be the best marketers they can be through our online learning platform and community. Check out our resources and membership to get involved, as we'd love to welcome you to our inner circle.
Right, let's dive into an episode together. Hello and welcome back to the Girls in Marketing podcast. Today we are back with a brand new snack episode and we're going to be chatting all about audience versus community. These are kind of buzzwords in the marketing world and we thought that it would be good to just chat about them, the differences, similarities between the two. So as a bit of a clarification first, let's define audience and community. What do we think?
So I think audience is people following you, kind of what it says on the tin. Audience is just like anyone who's following you, and community is that engagement, isn't it? It's the people who are really engaged with your brand. It's people who kind of have the most influence on your brand and people who are kind of advocates for your brand as well, I think. Community, obviously, like you said there, it's become like a massive, massive buzzword over the past like couple of years, but I think it's a buzzword for a reason. Like, community is so important, especially in today's like environment, kind of like everything going on at the moment. Like, I think it's so important for people to be advocates of your brand and to have people really engage with your brand and be rewarding community as well, because I think that's what we always like tell people to do as well, like reward your community members, because that's how you're gonna like reinstate community. And I think the difference between community and an audience has definitely like got more and more apparent over the past couple of years to a few months.
Yeah, I think it's about that like two-way conversation. It's an audience, you're speaking to, you know, however many people, whether it's 10 people or a million, you are speaking to them. Whereas for me, community is much more about that two-way conversation. You're, as you said, you're listening to what the community want, you're rewarding them, you're giving them things. And it's kind of like that, like almost, I would say community leads to that like a bit of a fan base, like where people used to use that for like musicians, but I feel when you have a brand and you're able to build a community, it's almost like you're building a community of like fans and a fan base where they're the biggest advocates for your brand and they are the people that kind of buy from you, but they're also like almost like ambassadors for your brand as well. You know, you see so many brands kind of leaning into that, but I also do see so many brands who don't, and it's kind of sad because there's so much potential with community.
Yeah, I think definitely for me, community as well feels less transactional than audience. I think there's less of a motivation from brands to just kind of sell and just convert. And I think that, like you said, Kira, I think community's become so much bigger in recent years for brands because consumers are seeing past when brands are only speaking about themselves, their own products. So let's face it, like you just don't care beyond like actually finding a product that you like and purchasing it. Like, how much do you actually care about that business otherwise and like what they're doing? And if it's very much kind of I, we in terms of like just speaking about you as a brand, your community, just they're not that engaged. You're not going to keep them engaged with you between one purchase and the next. And I think that the way that brands are building communities is keeping them involved, even if it's not with the intention of always kind of converting them to buy a product, buy a service, necessarily do something with you. It's just keeping them there. And I think that community aspect builds into kind of, you know, customer loyalty, you know, building people who are kind of advocates for your brand. And I think that there are so many benefits of building community that, you know, we've seen from so many big brands. And I think definitely there aren't enough of them doing it. But yeah, I think that's kind of what I would say the difference is. And I think there's so many opportunities that brands can make the most of, but don't. I mean, I don't know if you guys have any examples of brands that you think do it really well.
Yeah, I think for me, definitely Nike or however people pronounce it, because I'm just going to put it out there. I pronounce it as Nike, but I know some people pronounce it as Nike. So clarification definitely for all the listeners. I would say definitely Nike. But essentially they do a lot in terms of community. But one thing that I love that they did do was they started kind of run clubs. So rather than, obviously they have a massive like brand, it's literally a global brand. They have a lot of followers and a big audience, and they started to lean into that audience and build a community. So they started run clubs. I think the first one started maybe in like New York or something like that. Don't quote me on the facts, but essentially that was a place that people went to literally run. Like there's no Nike involved, unless obviously they want there to be. They didn't go with, merch and say everyone have Nike and run in Nike. It was very much like come together, be part of this community in this location. And then they kind of like rolled that out. And then off the back of that, they also created social media accounts for each run club and the run club in general. And then now that's like a brand off the back of Nike, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think they've really done that well, especially within the fitness industry. And I actually think that a lot of fitness brands do it really well. But they were kind of like a bit of the OGs because they started the run clubs quite a few years ago now. And I know that they also do a lot within kind of making fitness more accessible and lots of stuff like that. But I really liked the kind of run club idea.
Yeah.
That it wasn't focused around them as a brand, but it was focused around their community and what their community likes to do.
Definitely. And I think that's a really great way to build a community, isn't it? It's around a shared interest. So it's not necessarily around your brand and your brand name, but it's around that collective shared interest that your customers all will have as a result of kind of being consumers of your brand. And I think another one that does it similar to fitness brand, I think Peloton do it really well. So obviously, if you're going to join a kind of Peloton-based community, the likelihood is you will have a Peloton bike. You're not going to join Peloton's massive Facebook group. Well, you might join the group to kind of find out people's experiences with them, and it might kind of push you over to buy them on yourself. But yeah, they have things like, they have a huge Facebook group where people can kind of go on there, share their interest of, using the Peloton, fitness, all of that sort of stuff, kind of share their progress with using it and all of that kind of thing. And I think that, again, that's not necessarily of any sort of monetary benefit for Peloton really, but they're just facilitating this place for people to kind of go and speak about their shared interest in that particular thing. And then they also kind of feature Peloton customers who have achieved different things using the bike on like they have like a subsection of their blog where they feature them on there. So again, it's just kind of picking out people in your community and highlighting them and really kind of humanizing the brand in, like you said, Olivia, in like a two-way kind of dialogue way. And I think that there's so much that you can learn from that. Like there are so many ways for all brands, not necessarily, fitness related brands, to kind of make the most of those opportunities, kind of I don't want to say exploit because that sounds like a negative thing, but exploit in a good way, the shared kind of interests that your customers are going to have, whether it's fitness, whether it's creativity, whether it's reading, whether it's education, whatever it might be, there's probably some way you can facilitate some sort of community from that.
Yeah. I think the problem is that there are a lot of brands and businesses that just want marketing to be sales, and they're just kind of really obsessed with how do we just get these people to buy. Like they're not bothered about who those people are, what their interests are. As you said, Amy, very much they're just interested in, let's get in front of these customers and let's make them buy something. And I think the brands that are leaning into the community show that they care. And in the in 2023, the year that we're in, you have to care about your customers. Like and that shows the brands that do that, the likes of Peloton, Nike, there's lots of others as well. The brands that lean into that see such a massive such a massive increase in sales, even though that's not the reason. It's kind of like you're showing your community, because that's what it is when you do these things, that you care about them.
Yeah, and I think like obviously Nike and Peloton, massive brands, and it's like obviously not every single brand's going to be able to do like a running club every week or like an event every week, but I think just a lot of people listening might be from like small businesses, but I think like you said, Amy, there's always something that you can do, whether that's online, offline. There's always something you can do around community and like a shared interest, whatever the business is, whether it's, I don't know, like fitness brand, a drinks brand, like Innocent, they have like a massive community online as well. So there's always something you can do. And I think just kind of seeing the opportunities and kind of like taking inspiration from the big brands, but like making it like smaller and more achievable. Don't say, oh, we're going to do like this many community events like a month, like that's just unachievable. Like set some small goals and set like some small targets and think about why you're building this community. Why are you wanting these people to be like advocates for your brand? And then I think that's when it comes more naturally, and it comes across more naturally to like your audience as well.
Yeah, and I think it can be a hard sell, like you said, Liv. You know, I think sometimes it can be difficult if you maybe work for an organisation who just want your marketing to be a lead generation for sales. And as we know as marketers, there's so many more objectives that you can have in marketing than sales. There's so many more things that you can strive to do with your marketing. And I think creating community offers the opportunity to achieve things like, you know, improving customer loyalty and customer retention. Because let's face it, say you're a brand who's got a fair amount of competitors, what is differentiating you from them? And if it is the fact that you're investing time in your community, in nurturing that community, paying attention to them, providing spaces for them to meet, to talk, listening to their feedback, asking for their feedback on the next products you create, all of that sort of stuff, the likelihood is, even if you're not, you know, purchasing every time you see a post from them, the next time that you come around to purchasing a new thing, you're going to stick with them. I think Apple are great for doing that. Again, I know, Kira, you were saying about smaller brands, and these are huge brand examples, but I think they're really great at doing that because, you know, the way that they kind of engage with you as a customer, but in kind of like a community way. You know, when it comes to then buying the next product, you're not, well, I mean, personally, I'm not necessarily thinking about going elsewhere, and they know that you're not always going to be buying an Apple product every week, but it's about fostering a sense of community and, you know, wanting your feedback on things. And I think that there's so many more objectives that you can hit with community that, you know, hopefully, even if you work for a smaller organisation, you can kind of communicate back to your teams, your senior leaders, and show how it can be beneficial, you know, beyond just sales.
Yeah, in terms of smaller brands, because I do think it's really important to talk about it, because, you know, we do talk about big brands, but I think a really good thing to do to like engage with the community, and it literally just starts on Instagram. You know, Instagram stories, the kind of like questions box feature, even just like opening a Q&A, whether it's weekly or whether it's monthly or however often, and just asking your community things, not even like, oh, what do you want to see from us, but just generally saying like, you know, anything, like opening the discussion. Something that I used to do at the very beginning of Girls in Marketing, when before we had like a team and everything like that, is I kind of did like a talkative Tuesdays on Instagram stories where I would pick a kind of topic of marketing and we would talk about that topic, and I'd get people's opinions on it, and like people would be able to, you know, reply. And I think that for me at the beginning was fostering that community, and I very much focused on like a subject area for that. So you can obviously do more generic Q&As on Instagram stories, but even just like setting up maybe so you lead with value, so that you've got that education piece to say, right, you know, this week we're going to talk about this topic. So maybe if you work for like a recruitment company, for example, you can say this week we're talking about CVs, and you can put on maybe some information on stories, and then after it you can say, you know, do you have any questions about CVs, or maybe do a poll and say, you know, do you have your photo on your CV, or do you have, you know, how do you structure a CV and stuff like that. Even just to open up that dialogue on Instagram stories as a really accessible way for your audience, as it is right now, to become your community, I think is great.
I agree.
Definitely. And I think it's just about rewarding people, but also making people feel valued when they do interact, making people think and also wanting to know what people are thinking. So like you said, like polls or like question boxes that encourages people to kind of tell you your opinion on stuff. They're always like a really good way. And I think it myself, even like podcasts that have like Instagram pages, they want like the community to get involved and stuff. And I think I always think like if someone's like, oh, we're on a podcast, oh, we asked our community, blah, blah, and I'm like, oh yeah, I was part of the 14% who said that or something. It's like, it is just feeling like valued, isn't it? And thinking, oh yeah, like I've been part of that community. I've been like part of that community. So it's
I was just going to say, and probably one final point on this, but I was just going to say kind of, one thing that we don't often talk about on the podcast, which is weird, is that one great way to build a community is with a podcast. I mean, our podcast our kind of key marketing objectives for the podcast are not to drive sales necessarily. It's great if people want to join the Girls in Marketing membership as a result of listening to us. They want to get to know us better. Like they want to engage with our community through our membership, or they want to go and find out what other things we do, what events we've got going on. That's amazing. But for us, like the podcast is such a great way for us to, again, connect with our community. Like you said, we ask people what they want to hear on the podcast. We create the content. It's so, again, like even things like creating podcasts, and that's a really accessible thing for, you know, small businesses to do as well. Starting a podcast that's, I don't know, maybe talking about, you know, particular topics in your industry. It might be quite niche, or I don't know, like sharing the behind the scenes of your company and that sort of stuff. I think it's a really great way to kind of build on some of those other objectives and kind of, yeah, be there for your community and start that conversation.
Yeah, and that's definitely like a trend for 2023, isn't it? That kind of like video, audio content. So you're keeping up with the times at the same time as building that community.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of the Girls in Marketing podcast. We love hearing from you, so if you enjoyed this episode, leave us a review to let us know your thoughts, and make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button to be the first to hear when our new episodes released. Don't forget, if you want to get involved with Girls in Marketing, check out our membership to join our incredible community of marketers. Think marketing resources, courses, webinars, and more. Find out more on our website or drop us a message on any of our social channels @Girls in Marketing.